Why are so many powerful people trying to make it so difficult for us to vote?
Keeps me awake, the look on your face the moment you heard the news. You're screaming inside and frozen in time. You did all that you could do. And the big bad man and his big bad clan, their hands are stained with red. Oh, how quickly they forget. They aren't gonna help us. Too busy helping themselves. They aren't gonna change this. We gotta do it ourselves. They think that it's over, but it's just begun. Only one thing can save us.
Let me put it on you. It's American flag.
Only the young. Only the young.
You gotta hold on to that for the rest of your life.
Only the young. Only the young. Only the young. Only the young can run. Can run.
We can fight through it peacefully, you know?
Think about how you would like the world to be for your daughters and granddaughters.
We're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay. I promise.
All right, good afternoon, California Democrats. I want to welcome you to the November 2020 Executive Board meeting of the California Democratic Party. We're going to call this meeting to order first and foremost to really celebrate what we have all done to make a change in this country. Starting with a change in the White House, ensuring that we elected Joe Biden and our very own Kamala Harris. All of you, many of you, and so many others made that happen. And so it really is a moment for us to take a moment, pause, reflect, and to celebrate. There's no shortage of work for us to do, and we'll get right back at it. But I think we should take a moment just to celebrate the great work that has been done. Today, we're going to hear from a number of outstanding speakers. We're going to hear from Assemblymember Shirley Weber, Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, Senator Maria Elena Durazo, Chair of the Latino Caucus, and Assemblymember David Chu, who is the Chair of the API Caucus. We'll also be joined by Secretary of State Alex Padilla, who did a great job of ensuring that we have 22 million Californians registered to vote. We'll also hear from our officers, our Vice Chair Alex Rooker, our Vice Chair Daraka Lermo Hall, Controller Dan Weitzman, and Secretary Jenny Bach. We're then going to have the opportunity to hear from our leaders within our party, our staff, who led an outstanding 2020 coordinated campaign. And so I want to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. And now I want to turn it over to Mark Macaro, who is the tribal chairman of the Pechanga Band of Los Sueños Indians from Southern California. Chairman Macaro.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. First, a land acknowledgement. Since we're doing this virtually, each of you, I'd like to ask you over the next hour, usually we do this in real time physically where we're at, but over the next hour, log into this website. I don't know if you can see it on my cell phone. It's called nativeland.ca, and it should be available as an app on your URL, regardless of your phone type. It's just off the web. It's a clean little app. And what it does is you plug in your zip code on the top search bar, and it'll tell you, it'll geolocate you, and it'll tell you whose native land you are on here in the state of California. And so Subsequent to that, I would like you folks to do that. But as I was introduced, I'm the tribal chairman, Mark McCarl from the Pechanga Band of Luceño Indians. In our language and amongst our people, we call ourselves Payom Kavuchum. We're the Western people, and we're the Pechanga Band of the Western people. I want to share a few good words with you, just to take a minute to reflect and set the frame for you folks and all of us together as we move forward from this point in time. Na poik cho onam lachi tum chami pumama yupi cho nga hinga chamawo achman be any monan taki monan chami hinga alachwingai cho khoshpu yunnach cho onam supulnga to won chantacha yalenik toya kon tete lana yalenik to sho shalachma woltama achiye papi cho on hicha loviman. Just a real quick translation of this. It's an invocation of sorts. We're calling on the Creator, the one who is above, and asking for protection in everything that we do, and asking for guidance also in everything that we do. We're also asking that we should always be together as one people, that we should always be able to be looking at each other straight on, that we shouldn't be looking sideways at each other, that we should be able to smile with one another and laugh with one another. And that if we could do just these few things, then everything would be okay. And so welcome to native California. Reflect on whose lands you are on. And remember, we have been here a long time, and we're happy to share the state with all of you. Thank you very much. Love.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Credentials Committee met earlier this week and approved 279 registered executive board members. We have a quorum, which without objection will be extended to tomorrow's general session. In memory of longtime Credentials Committee member Merle Davis, is there a motion and a second to adopt the credentials report? Seeing no debate or discussion online and seeing no objection, the credentials report is hereby adopted by acclamation. Thank you much, and Zoom you all next year.
All right. Well, thank you to our lead co-chair, Wagaman, for that great report. Pledge of allegiance from our regional director, Bill Monroe, and of course, our land acknowledgement from Chairman McCarl. There is no shortage, as we know, there are no shortage of phenomenal leaders here in California. And we've got the opportunity to hear from just a few of them this afternoon. I want to begin by introducing the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, Assemblymember Dr. Shirley Weber, who has been a leader on so many important issues, public education, criminal justice reform, racial justice, and much, much more. Hailing all the way from San Diego, California, Assemblymember Dr. Shirley Weber.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for the invitation to be with you. I know you're doing important work, and you've given us about 2 minutes to tell you what's going on and what's happening, particularly with African Americans and the most recent events in terms of voting. I try to think of the best way to utilize this time to talk about where we are in the party and where we need to go in regards to African American communities. Clearly, the last election was evident not only in California, but across the nation, that African Americans turn out in great numbers for issues that they believe in. And when they do, they generally vote Democrat. It was demonstrated in so many ways. And we've read probably so many articles, and we know we're still fighting the ballot in Georgia with regards to the Senate race because of that. And the issue in obviously in Georgia and Philadelphia and those other areas that basically changed the direction of the election, was actually due to the work of a significant number of African-American women and African-Americans overall. They're probably the most solid voting population for the Democratic Party anywhere. And so finally that has become evident. My concern lies in the fact that as we look at that and we approach it and how do we utilize it, it becomes extremely important that we recognize some issues. And during the last election, I was confronted with a number of issues by young people who basically asked the question, why should we vote with the Democratic Party? And it was clear that they should because of who the opposition was. Had Trump not been such a vile individual, it probably would have been difficult at some point to convince a number of young African Americans, particularly African American males, as to what they get from voting for the party. When Trump raised the issue about, are you better off as a result of a Democrat during his election, it piqued the interest, interestingly enough, of a number of African Americans, particularly young African Americans. And those of us who've been in the party for a long time know that what the answer is, because of what the opposition not only has been recently, but has been historically. And we look at the broader issues of social justice and women's rights and all those kinds of things that are really critically important. But the younger generation looks at it also, but it also sees it from a different lens. And so we have to do better. The interesting thing is I'm on a mailing list with the Republican Party, and I never gotten off of it because I wanted to know what the other side thinks. And recently I got an article where they're talking about how are they going to shift so many areas in California that are blue back to red. And this person who I'd lost an election was talking about the fact that they had to begin to appeal to these populations that are historically very, very blue. And they were making reference to African Americans and particularly African American males. And so they're going to be the target. They're going to be the target in the next elections that come forward. And as a party, we're going to have to begin to address that. And I know the Black Caucus recognizes that we're going to have to be able to answer that question. Are they better off with the Democratic Party than the Republican Party? And many of them are using a number of things as a litmus test to determine whether or not they are. Some of them will be reparations. Some of them will be Black Lives Matter. Some of them will be the educational situation of African-American children. But these are issues that oftentimes the party, we have kind of taken a response to, a tacit response where we've given yes to those things, but not really put the energy and the force of the party behind it, and not made it stand out as major platform issues that have to be addressed. They're in the platform, but they're not often major issues that need to be addressed, nor that the legislative bodies that represent the Democratic Party are addressing themselves in a very direct way. And so I think as I look at it, we did a great job this last time. Those folks who should be voting did. We had some failures, and people look at that in Prop 16 and some others, and there are a host of reasons why we weren't able to affect change in that area. But as I look at the broader picture of where we're going with this party and where we're going to be, I am greatly concerned that many of my young people who come to me are going to defect from the party. That when we start looking at who the young Dems are, they're oftentimes not African-American males. They feel that the party responds to everyone but them. We respond to women, we respond to the LGBT, we respond to other kinds of groups that are external, but they don't really respond to African-American males. And as a result, that's a concern. And now African-American females, the younger ones, also ask the same questions. Are the pathways to leadership going to be the same as it was for Maxine Waters or Barbara Lee for them? That's a question, because as we look at what is going on, there's great concern. So I think as a party, we celebrate ourselves. We've done a great job. But the piece that we've taken for granted for many years, and people say, oh, we've taken African Americans for granted. That is true. And how do we respond to that? We have to respond in terms of programs, engagement, young people being engaged in the party that are African Americans who don't always fit into the boxes that we put together. We have to demonstrate to them that there's a reason to be a Democrat, because they're not like, they don't have the background of discrimination and race and issues that I have that can hopefully help me navigate some of the conversation that's out there and see through the conversation and understand why it is important that all of these alliances stand together. They want something more concrete for themselves in those alliances that basically addresses their issues. So that when someone says to them, are you better off? They can point to the fact that, yes, there's greater opportunities for training and education. The labor organizations are more responsive to their needs in terms of apprenticeship programs and those kinds of things. Our business communities, the opportunity to go to do business is extremely important. We're supporting that. The issues of social justice are not just background issues, but upfront issues for them. And so when we begin to fashion the party's agenda, not only in California, but across the nation, we have to be very careful, because I can tell you, they're coming for our young African Americans. They're coming, and they're coming hard for the next election. And we will probably see some of that, because this person who sent me this email showed me all the ways that they're going to approach our children, going to approach young people and take our message and fashion it in a direction that they want to go, with underlying realities that very little will change, but young people may not see the message itself. So I'm encouraging us to, and I'm more than willing to help to really start talking about how we're going to refashion this party, so that we can really, when people say, are you've got Black votes there, are you really taking advantage? Are you being supportive of it? It is more than them thinking, oh, I've been taken advantage of for my vote. They say, no, I'm influencing decisions, and those decisions will benefit me immediately and in the future. So once again, thank you guys so very much for having me come. I hope that this changes our conversation. It gives us some direction as to where we need to go, because it's really, really important, because I can tell you, they're coming for us, and they're coming hard.
Well, Assemblymember, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for reminding us that we can't just be against something, we have to be for something. And certainly, while we celebrate the success of what we just experienced over the last few days, we obviously know we have significant work to do. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to make sure that everybody here is aware of our 4:30 session on racial justice. And I hope you will all join us for that, which I think is directly connected to Assemblymember Weber's words and her sentiment in calling on us to do more, to be more. In fact, I'd ask the staff to include the link to that session in the chat as well. So next up is a leader that really needs no introduction in this party, a leader that's been a fighter for immigrant rights, for workers' rights, for LGBTQ rights on so many different fronts, and our DNC Vice Chair, now Senator Maria Elena Durazo. Senator.
Okay. Okay, here I am, right? Yes?
You're good to go.
Good. Good afternoon, Democrats, and thank you to Rusty, the officers, Alex, Duraka, Jenny, and Dan, all the staff, all the executive board members. A lot of these Zoom meetings kind of give us fatigue, mental fatigue. I was talking with Dr. Weber the other day, but you still have to do the work, and you have, and that's what counts. Finally, after 10 days, the presidential election is over. We won. We elected Joe Biden and our very own California Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. There are so many people and organizations and communities and groups who contributed and who need to take the credit for the Biden-Harris victory. As chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus, I want to talk about the contributions Latinos made as one of the groups and Latino voters made to our coalition of voters across the country. First, we saw record turnout amongst Latino voters. 26 million Latinos went to the polls in this election. That's 64% of the eligible Latino voters, 32 million eligible. In previous elections, the routine number had been more or less around 50%. So 8 million more Latinos voted this year than 4 years ago. They made a significant difference in Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, helped flip seats for Democrats in those two states. In Arizona, 75% of Latinos voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that's why Joe Biden's the first Democrat to win Arizona since 1996, 24 years. I'm so proud of my home union, Unite Here Local 11, when hundreds of housekeepers and cooks and dishwashers worked full time and knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors in 100-degree weather, joined by other unions, the LA, even the LA Federation, the Arizona immigrants' rights groups, Seed the Vote. That's why Biden-Harris won, Kelly won, and they flipped 2 seats in the legislature. In another state, Texas, Democrats came close. In the future, if we invest in a true bottom-up organizing program between election cycles, we will make Texas blue. In California legislature, we lost one Latino because he went on to win mayor of San Diego, Mayor-elect Todd Gloria. We had a new record for Latina women at 17 and a record for Latina state senators at 7. But unlike many elections in the past, these victories, not unlike, just like elections in the past, our victories got enormous support from Californians. So often we have answered the call. We've got on buses, we've gone to canvas, we make calls. We've got on buses to go picket and march and raise money for those other states. So even though we had the virtual and the pandemic issues, we still made the calls, did the phone banking shifts. And I'm sure when you hear Rusty and Tracy's reports, they're gonna be accurate numbers because they don't tolerate BS. But sisters and brothers, it's not just about voting, that's the bare minimum. It's about getting involved and engaged. Our undocumented brothers and sisters can't vote, but they're out there knocking on doors and talking to voters on the phones to make sure Democrats win. They live the horrors of Trump's policies like child separation, the threats and the deportations carried out by ICE. Calling those things human rights violations doesn't even begin to accurately describe what that administration has done to our families. So we must keep Latinos and everyone in our party engaged, keep the momentum going. Especially right now, we have 2 runoff elections in Georgia. It's imperative that we elect Ossoff and Warnock and that they become our senators. Democrats will have control of the White House and the Congressional House, but not of the Senate. So we've got to win in Georgia. And this will give us the opportunity to pass finally comprehensive immigration reform. Latinos are going to be in Georgia to help to turn Georgia blue. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Weber. I see Assembly Member Chu, our sisters and brothers in all the caucuses. Thank you, Rusty, for your extraordinary leadership. Let's keep our sleeves rolled up and ready to dig into the work that's ahead of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Durazo, for your great words and reminding us not only of the success that we had, but also the work that still continues on so many important fronts. I now want to turn to our chair of the Legislative API Caucus, Assemblymember David Chu, who's been a leader on so many important fights, from renters' rights to transportation, to immigrant rights, to a woman's right to choose. Certainly excited to have him here. So let me turn it over to Assemblymember David Chu. Assemblymember.
Great, thank you, Rusty. Good afternoon, Democrats. Hello from San Francisco. And as a former member of this executive board, really appreciate everything you're doing to represent and fight for the bluest of the blue and all the work you've done this cycle. Your work, as you know, made an incredible difference, not just at the national level, but at the local and state level. And I want to just talk about that for a moment and the difference it made for our API communities. At the local level, if you look at the new Democratic elected officials, we have so many firsts in our Asian American communities, really thanks to your work. In Long Beach, the first Cambodian on the city council, Suli Sara. In Irvine, the first Muslim mayor, Farah Khan, the first Korean American on that city council, Tammy Kim. In San Mateo, the first API woman in its history on the city council, Amo Lee. Elk Grove, the first directly elected Sikh woman to become mayor, Bobby Singh Allen. In Sacramento, just announced this afternoon, the daughter of Hmong refugees, the first API woman to serve on their city council, Mai Vang. I'm just proud of so many of you who supported all of these Democratic and API first. And I'll just note also, all the folks I've just mentioned are all women. At the state level, like the good senator, I want to acknowledge one of our departing legislators, Todd Gloria, who just replaced a Republican to finally become the next Democratic mayor of San Diego, where he will lead the largest city to have a mayor of Asian American descent. And to those of you in Orange County, I want to thank you for electing the first Asian Democrat to represent your county in the state Senate. Dave Min knocked off a longtime Republican incumbent, thanks to all your support. At the federal level, we all know we are just waking up from a 4-year nightmare since that orange face monstrosity became our so-called president. This past year, the API Legislative Caucus that I'm proud to chair, we focused on the thousands of hate crimes committed against Asians instigated when Donald Trump referred to the Chinese virus and Kung flu. With many of you, we fought the fight for the census. Our caucus joined 2 lawsuits against the Trump administration, and I really want to appreciate all of you who were involved in that count. Our caucus has also fought alongside so many of you the deportation of our immigrant families during this time period, and we have a lot of work to do. And I want to just give a shout out to Dr. Weber, because our caucus stood with other ethnic caucuses in a strong stance to bring back affirmative action to California with Proposition 16. And while we're all very disappointed it failed, the fight for racial justice will continue. And I'm thrilled that not only did almost 70% of API voters support Joe Biden, but alongside the Women and Black Caucus, we are thrilled that our South Asian sister, our California favorite daughter, Kamala Harris, will be our next vice president. We were the first ethnic caucus to endorse her when she first ran for president, and I know we are all so proud that California will be represented by her. Just for a moment, moving forward, I'm proud that our caucus is one of the most progressive in the state capitol. And as the author of major tenant bills in recent years, I want to thank our party for supporting tenants, but we know the work continues. And as the author of the first law to allow for public banking in California, I want to thank our party for supporting public banking, and that work will continue. And if you look at the voting record of our API caucus, we actually have the most pro-environmental and pro-labor voting record. And during this time of climate crisis and inequality against workers, we have much work to do. But let me just close by saying, as goes California, so goes the country. I'm looking forward to our work together. We've got to do it. We've got to continue to take our country back, and look forward to doing this work with all of you, from those of us representing the API community in California. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Assemblymember, for those great words. And let's give, wherever we're at, let's give our California leaders a big round of applause for their great work and for being with us today, sharing with us all the great success that we've had, but also calling on us to do more, be more here in the California Democratic Party. I now want to turn it over to our officers. We'll be led off by our Vice Chair, Alex Rooker, followed by Vice Chair Duraka Lermo Hall, then our Controller, Dan Weitzman, and then our Secretary, Jenny Bach. So I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Rooker.
Good afternoon, everybody. Listen, I want to thank you all for everything each and every one of you did to make this election a success. You know how every time we get up, go, this is the most important election of our lifetime, and you all made it happen, either in your own rights in the state of California, calling Arizona and other states that needed help. And I want to thank each and every one of you, all the clubs, regional directors, county chairs, for all that you did. And I know you had local races to do, so you were pretty darn busy. You know, the DNC meeting that we will have will be the day after the inauguration. Whether that's going to be virtual or in person, we don't know at this point. But we will be talking. One of the first things I'm going to say to Tom Perez, the first Latino chair of the DNC, is thank you, thank you, thank you. Because he has put up with a lot of criticism and a lot of things thrown at him. But let me tell you, he did it. He inherited a DNC that had very little staff. You remember Donna Brazile had taken over for a while and she did a great job, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz kind of resigned in a hurry. So Tom had a lot to do and rebuild that party. And Robbie Mook said to him, who was Hillary Clinton's manager, said, you know, you're going to get millions of ideas and things you should do, and you should do this and you should do that. And, you know, he realized that was going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. Many people criticized him for not doing what they thought was the right thing to do. But you know what? He had a plan and he worked his plan and he did it and we made it and we won. So we should all say a big thank you to Tom Perez. You know, Texas 3 elections ago, we missed turning that blue by 13 points, then 9 points, and this last election by 5 points. So that is going to be blue probably the next election. And in Georgia, Latinos, I didn't realize how many Latinos were in Georgia. It's because they're quiet culture. They just do their thing. They go to work and, you know, people know they're there, but don't pay attention. I've got to talk to that Georgia chair, and he's got to put a program together with Latinos because they're going to make a big difference in Georgia. And on the API community, there's 30,000 API voters that voted for the first time this last election in Georgia. So all the diversity is growing in all these states, and we have got to pay attention to them. And Robbie Hunter from the State Building Trades admitted HRE was there in Arizona with DACA folks working their butts off. So I do believe that that is the reason why they want Arizona. They've been working that incrementally for a long time, and they finally made it. And the big push came from HRE and other labor folks and a lot of the DACA folks. So I want to thank them. And, you know, people ask, well, what did Biden do in California? Well, he appointed Mark Gonzalez, our LA County chair, and Mark Gonzalez did a phenomenal job getting volunteers to call all these states in the battleground states. And he had 5,000 volunteers a day. He had 60 virtual staging locations or phone banks led by the headquarters. He worked with the California Democratic Coordinated Campaign. So, and he also had record number of Latinos out to vote. He worked on that. I mean, he was busy 24/7. You know, I want to thank him for all that too. And I want to thank our staff who, you know, every time I go into headquarters, they are working. They work 24/7. And our ED, Yvette Martinez, don't even mention it. She's working all the time. I don't think she sleeps. And Rusty Hicks is raising money. Everybody I call, he's already called. He works his ass off. So, you know, that is the hardest job in the world, to be chair of a party. I know it. I had it for 6 months. You are constantly raising money because you got to keep the lights on, pay the staff, and you got to work the programs. And people want resources, but we got to help bring those resources to help our chair, Rusty Hicks, and doing the job that we need to do. So there's a lot of work to do. And my respects to Assemblymember Weber, but Latinos in California also have to be included in programs. We're 40% of the population here in California. And, you know, one of these days, Latinos are going to have an uprising, and they're going to say, you know what, you always say mañana, 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 tomorrow, you'll get it tomorrow. We'll pay attention to you tomorrow. And you know what they're going to say? Mañana never comes. So we're tired of it. And Republicans are also going to capitalize on that. So we need to have a program to continually educate, especially in the Central Valley and other areas, that Latinos need to be educated on our elections, that they are safe, that we have a Latino Secretary of State that did a phenomenal job, that deserves all the praise. What happened in California? Nothing. We had everything good happen and nothing bad. So, you know, I always get complimented when I go to these Association State Democratic Chair meetings about California, and they just say, how do you guys do it? So I want to thank our Secretary of State also. And I want to mention one thing that really bothered me. When we had the DACA vote a while back to allow DACA folks to become members of the Democratic Party, do you remember we took a vote? I caught 7 people from our Democratic leadership vote against it. And there is one in my backyard that I will talk to see if maybe there's something I can help people understand what it is about DACA folks and why they need our help and support. So I would hope, glad it was only 7, but I would hope that we would all understand that. One of the things I do want to mention, just so you know what we did nationwide, we flipped more than 400 state legislative seats. This is across the country. Flipped 4 Senate seats, 5 treasurer seats, 4 Secretary of State seats, 4 Attorney General seats, 7 new Democratic supermajorities, 5 Republican supermajorities. We broke them. We gained 6 total Democratic state legislative majorities. We flipped 7 governor seats, and we flipped the White House. So thank you to all of you, and to the leadership of Rusty Hicks and to Tom Perez for all of that. We should have nothing bad to say. Maybe some suggestions, but nothing bad to say, because obviously the battleground state program that Tom put together was successful. And now we got to have our minds on Georgia and make that happen, because the work isn't done yet. And I know Tom's not going to run again. He says he's going to take a month-long vacation with his family and go do other things. And that's of his own choice. Our President-elect Biden will decide who will be our next chair, and we will go from there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Hey everyone, it's been good to see people the last few days, even if virtually, and I hope that folks appreciated that I just finally sacrificed my COVID fro. I've got a new do going on. But look, I want to talk about something that I've watched happen. You know, I've seen in the media that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has become this punching bag for folks who are angry about losing House seats. And in response, she's been so thoughtful in proposing some really good constructive criticisms about why the coattails of the presidential election weren't as strong as they needed to be, and things that are relevant for us as Californians, and looking at why the strength of how we did at the top of the ticket wasn't translated into ensuring that we protected workers' rights at the ballot box or made progress on tax reform. And one thing that I noticed in how the media was talking about that sort of conversation and how Twitter dealt with it is how Democrats are really bad about disagreeing. And it's ironic because we're very good at disagreeing, but we're bad at normalizing it and understanding that it's a part of being a political party, especially being a majority political party that needs to bring together so many different voices. And I've been thinking about that, of course, in terms of CBP and our own discussions and the work that we have to do between now and convention, and now and when all of us officers are no longer, at least in this term, and new folks take positions throughout the party. And I think we have a lot to do, but part of that should be some reflection and self-criticism and learning from mistakes, and also a chance to make reforms and changes to our structure. I think that this inability to have good disagreements is in part a structural problem. I guess I was just trained to think about things in terms of structure and culture rather than individuals. And one thing that I've noticed is that whenever anybody proposes change, there's kind of 2 immediate reactions. One is that it gets personalized. So, you know, AOC is being just divisive and destructive and so forth, instead of just actually offering good criticisms. Or it's sort of brushed aside as not the right time, right? Where either we just had an election, so we should just be celebrating, or there's an election coming up, so we should be unified. And we're just not good at like both being able to know that we have disagreements, but we're all Democrats, but have space and make space to have meaningful discussions about how we go forward. So in the next few days or so forth, we're going to be setting our agenda for the next few months. We have a lot to do, a lot to do. ADEMs and obviously more debriefing, fundraising to do, etc. Please be on the lookout for a Dungeons & Dragons themed fundraiser from me that I hope you'll help out with. But I really think that part of that should be talking about the fact that unlike any NGO or union or nonprofit that you're involved in, this organization is incredibly heavily centralized around one office. And we should take the opportunity to make changes to that before we put new people in those offices. So let's keep that in mind before we kind of do what we usually do, which is brush change aside. Don't do it or have the conversation in a timely way because, you know, it's never the right time. Let's do it now. Thanks a lot.
So good afternoon, fellow party leaders. I'm really honored to address you today and be a part of this e-board, albeit virtual. So we had quite a 2020, right? I mean, we had quite a 2020. We had quite an exciting month for me and my family. Let's think about this for a second. The Lakers are the NBA champs. The Dodgers are the World Series champs. And oh yeah, Joe and Kamala won, which was huge. Joe and Kamala won because we worked hard, we called, and we texted in the swing states, and we all pitched in. So I want to take my time today to kind of, once again, talk to you guys about our party's grassroots program, our party's pitch-in program, DEM 2020, which will soon to be DEM 2022. This program is the pride kind of the finance committee, and we're really proud of it with our co-chair, Deborah Vincent, who really took a lot of leadership in this. DEM 2020 is our grassroots effort to raise money for this party. It's our ideas to build a better party and a flatter party. Now, through this program, just to give you guys some context on what we did, we raised over $135,000 for this party, with the average contribution being $18 a month. It's $18. Now, to people in my faith, that's a big number. 18 means life. So I want to make sure that all of you understand how important that is. Now, this was about making our voices heard. And this was about us saying that we care about our party. This was 100% clean money. It was federal dollars, and it was vital, and I mean vital, to our GOTV efforts and our party-based building. But you know what? I believe we can do better. All of us are leaders in this party, and all of us must remember that we all inspire the vision to our activists to support our party. All of us, we are just a small sampling of the 10 million voters in California that are Democrats. So we have to kind of take that on. We talk a lot about what we should and shouldn't accept in money, right? We have conversations, good money, bad money. And I think that's a really healthy and useful conversation, but it's not enough to talk about the shouldn'ts. We must act and build on the shoulds and figure out who we should take money from, and that should be us. We must act in an affirmative and deliberative way to lead so people will follow us. Progressive values without progressive action, to me, is shouting in the wind. And I know what we want actions. And so I am committed to making sure this DEM 2020 True program is big and bigger. I'm committing to upping my number for 2022. I'm committed to finding more people to be part of DEM 2022. My committee members are already reached into their pockets through our committee meeting today, and they're willing to do their part. They're willing to reach out to more people. My only question is, who will join us? Who will be a part of flattening our party's finances? We have the infrastructure. We have the will. I know it. I know that we can do it. And I know this party can build. Now, I did a little calculations, and if 300 of us, which is about 300 people on the e-board, all just gave $20 a month, $20, that's over $250,000 in small dollar contributions to the party. And that's just us. That's just our little group. Just think if we got 30,000 or bigger numbers. So I know we can build it. This is our real opportunity to really do something big. This is our moment, and I think we should grab it. And I think if all of us just give a little, we can do big things to pitch in. And so I'm committed to it. I hope you are too. I hope you are willing to hear the call of my committee and this party leadership. We've had a lot of great things happen through small dollar fundraising. We've had a party leadership and a party chair who has enabled us to do good things and has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in small dollars. So he's met the challenge. Now we have to do it. So I look forward to this conversation. And I look forward to pushing this program in the coming months, in the coming years. And it's my honor now to introduce our party secretary, Jenny Bach.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, Democrats, and happy Diwali. So we gather here today triumphant because we moved mountains this election year and unequivocally fought for our values and our lives to win back our country. Together, we had a hand in electing a president with empathy. Together, we elected one of our own, the first ever South Asian, Black, and woman vice president. And I never thought I'd get to say this because it still feels so surreal, but I join all of you in saying congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. I have high hopes that we can build back the foundation of our country. And like many people, I'm looking forward to the agenda that will be set for repairing our country. We've seen what the GOP is capable of. We've watched 4 years in horror and disgust at the corruption. And all of it didn't just happen overnight. Historically, rising regimes have intricately laid out plans to deceive the masses at every level, something we have bared witness to these past years when it came to rampant misinformation, the separation of 666 migrant children from their families, voter suppression, the placement of dangerous people in seats of power to undermine our rights, and the intentional media debacles to create distraction after distraction. But because of your work and grit, Democrats, we defeated the festering evil that has been percolating into our systems. So I want to say thank you to all of you for making countless phone calls, holding text banks, for doing safe lit drops, for taking on campaigns, for helping out our state, other states, our neighbors. I want to give a special shout out to our young BIPOC community activists for stepping up and turning out the vote in tremendous ways this election cycle. Y'all have our immense gratitude for the service you've done to create transformative change in the years to come. And thanks to our leadership, our staff, our volunteers for all of the campaign work and amazing trainings that were conducted for our high school Dems and community members this year. They were awesome. So together, let's continue the work to dispel the spread of misinformation, especially the ones directed at our immigrant families. We need to start actively building our local benches with good Democrats. We need to continue building out our training programs, hold focused discussions on what we want to tackle, and have an open door policy with each other so we can succeed. The consequences of this administration will be felt for years and years to come. Now's the time to undo the damage, repair, rebuild, and reassess the current situation our communities are living in. So Democrats, let's talk, let's stay focused, and let's keep fighting. And let's help out our friends in Georgia and win these Senate seats this winter. I also want to announce at 5:30, I will be moderating a Young Gets It Done panel with CYD President Will Rodriguez Kennedy to celebrate young electeds from this election cycle. So I will drop off that link in the chat. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Matt. Thank you to the for those great remarks. I'm now. Sorry. It's now my honor and privilege to introduce our outstanding Secretary of State. Obviously, around the country, Secretaries of State played such an important role in ensuring that we enfranchised as many voters across the country as possible. And I know that our Secretary, California's own, was playing a leadership role in that effort. And so I'm proud to turn it over to Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Rusty. And hello, everybody. Thanks for chiming in. Virtual e-board. We usually appreciate getting together in person, but these are the times that we're living in. And I just want to join the chorus of everybody saying how thrilled I am in the election of President-elect Joe Biden and our own Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. It's going to be a huge, huge and necessary change in our national leadership. But you know, when we look back on Tuesday, November 3rd and say, well, the election is not quite over. It's not just because it took several days for some of the final states to shake out in the presidential. It's because, yes, folks, the majority in the United States Senate hangs in the balance, and it comes down to Georgia. So we still have more work to do before the cycle is completely over. We will do our part to help elect Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff to the United States Senate, because folks, the path to ending the filibuster, the path to ditching Mitch and the path to balancing the Supreme Court runs through Georgia. And even though it's on the opposite coast, I know California is going to do its part. I know I'm going to do my part. But while the dust is still settling on the final ballots being processed and counted, I want to take a moment to thank all the local elections officials, all the volunteer poll workers throughout the state of California that did their part to helping us ensure an accessible, secure, and safe election, despite the many changes in how we administered the election this November. And for those of you in the audience that volunteered as poll workers or somehow else helped voters get to the polls, answer their questions, and protect their voting rights, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also want to acknowledge some of my colleagues from across the country. They've been referenced earlier. In the days after the election, anytime you turned on the news, and you might have seen Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar from Pennsylvania, or Secretary Jocelyn Benton from Michigan, or Secretary of State Katie Hobbs from Arizona, know how bold and brave they were in simply doing their jobs under the constant attack of Trump and the Republican Party. So yes, it's a reminder that secretaries of state are key, not just to protecting and expanding voting rights, but ensuring the integrity of our elections. And I'm proud to have played a part in the election of Secretaries Benson and Secretary Hobbs 2 years ago. You know, in my spare time and with my wife's permission, I serve as chair of the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. This cycle, we also helped elect Oregon Secretary of State-elect Shemia Fagan in our neighbor to the north. So the work continues in this critical election and beyond. You know, secretaries of state are clearly on the front lines of defending our democracy. You know, together we have defeated Donald Trump's sham voter fraud commission. Remember that he started out? You know, he's back to those same old lies, but he's already been repudiated. We have successfully secured new federal funding for election modernization, election security, and expansion of access. And we've worked hard to educate the public nationally and the media nationally on the election process. So we didn't have any missteps this year of calling any states too early and creating unnecessary chaos. And if you saw the newspapers, you saw the other news outlets, even parts of Fox News was calling out Trump for his voter fraud lies and conspiracy theories. It doesn't happen on its own. It wasn't inevitable. It's because of the hard work that my colleagues and I across the country have put in for months and years leading up to this point. Now, before we get back to the work that we have before us in California, I do want to just give a snapshot on what this cycle meant, how it looked, and what's going on. You know, we're still counting the last 740,000 some odd ballots, but it's clear that we had an incredibly smooth, incredibly successful election cycle in California, even despite the pandemic, right? The pandemic forced us to approach the November election a little bit differently. And I'll get to some of the changes in a minute, because I think some of them are here to stay. But just by the numbers, you know, we came into election day with more than 22 million Californians on the rolls. By far a state historic record. More than 88% of eligible voters already registered. You know, that's the highest rate that we've had in decades. More than 17 million ballots were cast this election, and we're still counting the last several, but it surpasses the previous record, which was 14.6 million ballots cast. That was in the presidential election just 4 years ago. So yes, the state of our democracy is strong. Here's another metric of an engaged electorate. You know, we launched this ballot tracking tool that I know many of you signed up for. Where's my ballot? More than 5 million voters in California signed up to track their ballot with our new ballot tracking tool. So when you're coming into 2020, that was going to be a big consequential year. That was even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, but working together, not just my office, but legislative representatives, the governor's office, voting rights advocates, county elections officials, and you all activists in each corner of the state of California, we formulated a way to administer the November election to make sure that it was secure but accessible and inclusive of all eligible voters. So just as a refresher, we mailed a ballot to every active registered voter in the state of California for the first time ever. yes, driven by COVID, but we knew when you put a ballot in the hands of every voter, more people will vote. We offered ballot tracking that I mentioned, hugely successful for people to have the confidence that their ballot was indeed, accounted for and counted at the end of the day. We gave people multiple options for how to return their ballot through the postal service, through official ballot drop boxes, none of that fake misleading stuff, official ballot drop boxes, or in person at any in-person voting location. We worked together to recruit 120,000 new poll workers to make sure that we maintained in-person voting options for people who needed it. So thank you for folks who played a part in that. And our overall voter education campaign to educate folks of vote by mail, their in-person options, how to stay safe while exercising their right to vote, was across platforms, newspaper, television, radio, social media, and across multiple languages. I think about a dozen languages. At the end of the day, you can see the work product of our voter education efforts on the Secretary of State's website or on our YouTube channel. And like I said, we maintained the in-person voting for people who needed it. If that all sounds familiar, it should, because the model for this November was built on the Voters' Choice Act, which this Democratic Party helped pass legislatively several years ago, expanding vote by mail, in-person early voting, the option of voting anywhere in your county, voting not just on election day, but for multiple days. The success of this November, I believe, tells us that this model was the right one. More than half the state's electorate benefited from the Voters' Choice Act even prior to this pandemic. But the success of this November tells us not only were we on the right track, but that this model is here to stay, and we're going to build on it going forward for the future of California elections, and I hope leading by example in states across the country. So with that, again, e-board members, just thank you for your support. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for the phone calls, the texts, everything that we did to get out the vote this year. Great news at the top with the Biden-Harris victory. The Senate, still hangs in the balance, but looking at down ballot, we know that there's more work to do in more parts of the state because the potential is there to turn California bluer, and I'm on board to do my part in the years ahead as well. So thank you, Rusty, for your leadership. Back to you.
Well, thank you everyone for sticking with us and sticking with this program. That was a sad moment, but we always pay our respects and our tributes to the Democrats who were with us and worked so hard alongside us for so many years. Now I want to introduce some good information here. We're going to give you kind of a snapshot of all the work that we did with our coordinated campaign team. As you know, the work has been going on for a year. Our staff and our team was stretched, was challenged with so many obstacles put in our way to get out the vote and to do our organizing. But against all odds, we did it. And I think if there's one takeaway lesson is that we can do hard things. We can problem together. We can collaborate together. And work never ends. I think someone mentioned they're not sure if I sleep. And, honestly, I haven't slept in months. And I know that our team hasn't slept either, but the work continues. And let's start off with our fabulous field team that has been co-led by Tracy and Leah. So let me pass it off to Tracy and Leah, and they're gonna give us a snapshot of all of the field campaign coordinating team. So Tracy and Leah, are you on?
Yep, thanks, Yvette.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And first, we'd like to just start out by saying what an honor and a privilege it's been to work for and with the California Democratic Party on this program this year. We entered 2020 knowing that we were facing big electoral challenges and also that we had a great opportunity to build our grassroots capacity and win on key races. But what we didn't know was just how unprecedented the challenges of 2020 would turn out to be. We've referenced them here, but just as a reminder how they kept flowing, the global pandemic, civil unrest around racial justice, the economic crisis, and a devastating fire season here in California. Can you move the slide, Moises, please? Despite facing these back-to-back challenges over the course of the year, the coordinated campaign and Democratic leaders and activists across the state worked together on the broad goals listed here on the slide. To be successful, we knew we needed to be well organized, draw on the talents of party leaders, activists, and partner organizations, and utilize the most cutting-edge technology. As 2020 unfolded, we had to adjust and retool our plans time and time again, trying different tactics and learning new ways to organize. It's really a testament to the leaders and activists of the party and the staff that we were able to do so much under very challenging circumstances. Next slide, please. One of the key components of the program was to be a truly coordinated campaign, which meant building working relationships with Democratic Central Committees and clubs and local, state, and national campaigns, supporting everything from candidates for school boards, city councils, and boards of supervisors to working with state, assembly, senate, and congressional races. And in the fall, we partnered with the DSCC and the DNC for targeted Senate races and the Biden-Harris ticket. For the California races, we really worked to make sure that voter contact be in support of the full Democratic slate from top to bottom, so that we could make the most efficient use of our volunteer time and hopefully make voters a little bit less crazy. As many of you know, it's no mean feat to get campaigns to work together. We shared resources over the course of the year with Democratic activists and other national, state, and local campaigns, including the compliance call system, the online slate tool, volunteer lists, Mobilize and Zoom accounts, training resources, scripts, and other technical tools. And we brought together local Dem activists, resistance groups, labor, and others to share information and work collaboratively rather than competing for turf, volunteers, and resources. The relationships built with non-Democratic Party activist groups will hopefully provide ongoing opportunities for the party to grow. Next slide, please. Thanks. This year of investment and effort by the party had a central goal of building long-term capacity engagement that would go beyond just the 2020 cycle. The campaign helped develop a new generation of activists, including hundreds of young and less young leaders through our Fellows and SuperVols program. People learned hands-on skills and moved into key leadership roles in the campaign, like recruiting volunteers, leading virtual house parties and action meetings, running virtual phone banks with anywhere from dozens to hundreds of people participating at a time, assisting with data management and other key campaign activities. We literally couldn't have done it without all these leaders stepping up. We also trained thousands of activists to use virtual organizing tools, which have become essential during the pandemic, including Zoom, Mobilize, virtual phone banks, and the online phone systems such as Calivo, ThruTalk, and Hub Dialer. This year's challenges required so much from our volunteers, and I can't say enough about the resilience, passion, and persistence that thousands and thousands of people brought to the efforts. Over this year, we've built an activist list that's now captured in NGP Van that has tens of thousands of California volunteers' contact information that the party will be able to use for its future efforts. Next slide. And 2020, more than any other year, relied on us to make the most use of technology to make the organizing possible. We had a lot of technology first, which are listed here on the slide, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. For the first time ever, we used both a compliance call system, a dialer, and the PDI online phone bank at scale, producing 520 phone banks, lists, and scripts for local and state campaigns. We broke new ground by attaching our democratic endorsements from the local to national level to every voter in the PDI voter file. That meant that volunteers could talk to voters about any and every candidate up and down the ticket or issue for that very specific voter. We provided a shared PDI account used by dozens of central committees and clubs that had data and had the data staff to support to helping create phone, walk, text, and mail files. And we introduced Mobilize. Hundreds of candidates and Democratic organizations, along with the coordinated campaign, used Mobilize to sign up, recruit, follow up, and now have the information about their volunteers. I want to, again, thanks the opportunity for working. I'm going to turn it over to my co-director, Leah Grundy, to talk about some of the other very concrete things we accomplished this year together. Leah, are you able to join?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you, Trace. I'll go back to where I started. So now I'd like to talk just a little bit about the action, how the coordinated campaign rolled out over the course of this last year as we ramped up a statewide field program at an unprecedented scale, and then adjusted it over and over as 2020 came at us with one challenge after the other. So first, to just remind everybody, the coordinated campaign actually started last November, as Yvette said. We started with an infrastructure building phase in which we hired staff, set up offices, and began the coordinating and planning with many of you who are on this call today. We rolled from there right into our second phase, which was the March primary. And in many ways, that was the last normal phase of this whole crazy campaign year, as we did all the door knocking and phone banking that we all normally do as a group, making 1.1 million calls and knocking on over 57,000 doors. And we all know what happened after that. So we had always intended to use those months from March to August to build up our activist base and strengthen our organizational muscle so that we would be ready to really chug into action during the fall general election. And then COVID came. And when COVID struck, we realized that we just had to do all of that virtually instead of in person. And so we moved into what we now are thinking of as the hybrid model, some in person when it can be done safely, and also virtual work that we think as a model is going to serve us really well as Democrats moving into the future with other campaigns. So during this virtual muscle building phase, we did over 500 virtual action meetings and house parties. That was a big tool that we used to create a way for people to connect, even during COVID, and broaden our base. It gave both experienced and new activists an opportunity to connect, share their stories, and find ways to get involved. We also moved the entire phone program, which became the bread and butter of field in this strange year, to virtual instead of having phone banks in our offices as is traditional. We first learned as a staff, and then we moved to teaching thousands and thousands of activists across the country to use the call system from home to make wellness checks, wellness check calls, census calls, new Democratic voter welcome wagon calls, and calls on issues we all care deeply about, like police accountability. Also during this phase, we learned how to do huge mobilizations virtually. We did 4 statewide days of action between March and August so that we could practice both mobilizing and using virtual tools at a really big scale. And those virtual mobilizations increased in size as we moved deeper into the summer months. let's see. So if we could just move to the next slide, Mercedes. So then starting in mid-August, we rolled into the nitty-gritty voter contact phase leading up to the general election. At that point, we moved to putting into action everything we'd been building for since last fall, with tens of thousands of volunteers, including probably everyone who's on this call today, participating in a full voter contact program for national, state, and local candidates. First, we did voter ID and persuasion in August and September, and then moved into a pretty hardcore GOTV program as soon as the ballots dropped in early October, as well as helping with election protection and truth squad work throughout that time. And this investment paid off. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to take a quick look at the numbers to quantify the work we all did together. Some big stuff that we all accomplished. In the course of 2020, we did a total of over 57,000 volunteerships. The earlier speaker, I forget who it was right. We counted them, all of them, as best we could. There was a total of over 15,000 participants in the virtual action meetings, house parties, trainings, and all different sorts of Democratic activist meetings. We did over 20.3 million dials, knocked on the over 57,000 doors in the primary, made a total of 627 and 6 contacts with voters, sent out over 12.3 million texts, and over 880,000 postcards and letters. And that doesn't even include the countless texts, postcards, calls that many central committees and clubs did independent of the coordinated campaign. So it was a huge, huge year of accomplishment in the field. Of these totals, I just want to note, we're particularly proud that a big chunk of them that we did as Californians went into battleground states across the country to save our democracy and nationwide. So of those numbers that I just rattled through, 26,000 of those shifts and 330,000 of those contacts were for the Biden-Harris ticket and or for Senate priorities in battleground states. And we actually have heard from the Biden campaign that California Democrats made fully 30% of all the calls nationally that went from non-battleground states to battleground states during the final weekends of GOTV. So with that, on behalf of myself and Trace and the whole coordinated campaign team that was in the field this year, we're so proud we had the opportunity to do this work together. It was a historic year. It was a historic opportunity for all of us to get to do this work with you, and we're glad we had a chance to make history together. And I will turn it over from there to Vincent Jones.
Buenos tardes, Democrats. I'm Vincent Jones, training consultant for the California Democratic Party. It's an honor to be with you on the first day of Diwali, or the Festival of Lights, where those who celebrate commemorate the triumph of good over evil. And I feel like we kind of did that in many ways this election cycle. Next slide. In many ways, the spirit of Diwali inspires the goal of the training department, which is to work collaboratively, inclusively, and strategically to help California Democrats win, or as some would say, to make sure good triumphs over evil. Next slide. This cycle, we focus on providing Democrats training opportunities on specific skills like being a volunteer or fundraising or making a hard ask with our in-person and virtual training extravaganzas. Next slide. We created a virtual platform for endorsed ballot initiative campaigns to educate Democrats on the party's position on ballot initiatives through our Prop Talk Wednesdays, and made sure they knew about the weekly Prop Talk Thursday virtual phone banks organized by our amazing coordinated campaign team. Next slide. We built a diverse Vote 2020 Truth Squad and provided them with a toolkit filled with messaging and graphics informed by extensive polling and focus groups to fight aggressive voter disinformation efforts. Next slide. And we created inspiring GOTV rallies geared towards specific communities to expand the Truth Squad's reach and funnel activists into our coordinated campaign digital efforts at the end of the campaign cycle. Next slide. All in all, we had engagement with nearly 5,000 attendees participating in over 80 events. Next slide. Going forward, we will assess our work from the past year, roll out trainings to help our party hold more inclusive, welcoming, and engaging meetings, do the type of organizing between elections that help power victories in Arizona and Georgia, and improve our ability to organize in and with diverse communities in a manner Assemblymember Shirley Weber and Vice Chair Alex Rooker spoke of earlier in the session. Please email us at training@cadem.org with your ideas for trainings for next year, because we know you have many, many ideas. I'd be remiss if I did not thank the amazing team at Cadem, namely India Thomas, and the dozens and dozens of volunteers who help to create, present, or do anything for one of our virtual events. Lastly, thank you to all of you who participated in our events and training sessions. Your engagement is incredibly appreciated and will make our party stronger, more inclusive, and win more. Now, let me introduce Ben Seinfeld and Kobe King, who will talk about our massive voter protection work. Yes, we can.
Thank you, Vincent. Moises, next slide. My name is Ben Seinfeld. I ran our congressional campaign program this year, and I also had the great privilege of working with Kobe King on our voter protection team. Next slide. So the CDP had the mission this year of growing our voter protection team to meet the challenges that we were expecting from the rhetoric coming from the Trump campaign. I think we all remembered seeing the videos where they were trying to recruit poll monitors and people to check the ballots and check all the polling locations. And so the CDP began very early organizing to basically bring all the parties together that will be playing a role within the Democratic umbrella this cycle to see how we could work together and really ensuring that everyone's right to vote was protected. Next slide. So starting in the summer of 2020, we started having meetings with key groups to start talking about what a voter protection program should look like in this current environment, especially considering all of the changes that we are going to be experiencing this cycle with the pandemic and the fast-tracked Voters' Choice Act in a lot of places, many counties running elections that they had never run before and having to adapt to those new rules. So we started having conversations with a lot of key strategic partners, including the DNC, the DCCC, all of our frontline congressional campaigns, and our Assembly and Senate campaigns and leadership. Next slide. And so in terms of the work we did, we really focused on that we needed to grow the program to a size that we hadn't seen before. And in a traditional cycle, the party would have maybe about 20, 30 attorneys recruited to help with working on issues that were out in the community and checking on polling locations. And what we did this cycle was we had a much more robust recruitment effort, reaching out to law firms, reaching out to previous volunteers and many groups. And we were able to recruit over 300 attorneys and bring in over 150 hotline workers. And additionally, this cycle, we were able to have hotline workers who were able to answer any calls that people had, whether if they were calling in Spanish, Korean, Mandarin, Cantonese, or Vietnamese. Kobe?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Next slide, please. So as Ben said, and this is a theme that we've been hearing all afternoon, just bigger, more, faster, better, bigger, more. And the voter protection team was no exception to that. As Ben said, we probably hit 10 times, we recruited 10 times as many attorneys as we normally do in the past, and we were just much more intense about having coverage in the field. One of the other big changes from this year is that we adopted for use for the first time something that the Democratic National Committee had in place for a few cycles, something called the LBJ database. And what this allowed us to do was not only assign various incidents as they came in, but also allowed a whole variety of people to see it, and so be able to see things as they were developing in real time. It was really, really helpful. I mean, anytime you use a brand new system, you're always going to have a couple of hiccups, but the truth of the matter is it was just a huge improvement, and there was no way in the world that had we used the old system this year with the expansion of the team that we could have done anything. So, and again, as Ben said, our strategic partners we worked very closely with, in addition to some of the folks that he mentioned, the consumer attorneys were very helpful. And we literally, I normally do in a typical year a couple of trainings, usually in mid to late October. We started this in we started actually holding trainings in September, and then just really focus on making sure that we could recruit attorneys all over the state. Next slide, please. And here's some of the results that everyone likes to see. The hotline workers did a phenomenal job. I mean, converting what was normally a kind of literally boiler room type operation at the state party headquarters into a virtual operation where people were using their own phones and a database, not only was a big change, but it allowed us to really significantly expand it. And because of the publicity we did around it, we received almost 3,700 different incidents, a huge increase over past years. About two-thirds to three-quarters of that were just questions where we were helping people figure out how to vote by mail, where their voting centers were, that sort of thing. And the other a quarter or so were what we call incidents, where there's an attorney that has to do some corrective action. The hotline received an average of 175 calls a day, and as I think as everyone knows, it's not just election day anymore. So we opened up the hotline to full operation on October 16th, and we're all the way through election day and beyond. In addition, while we recruited 300 attorneys, we sent 170 of them around the state. Very effective, and really were able to get a lot of coverage in the places where we needed the most. Next slide. Next slide. A couple of things I just want to mention. I won't read this text verbatim, but we did have incredible cooperation from the hot congressional campaigns. Monica Molina, who was assigned by the DCCC to come out and work with us, was fantastic. The legislative teams led by Gazzo and Kathy Bowler were also very cooperative. We've tried to work with the legislative folks and the DCCC in the past, but this year we really got it down, and it was an incredibly cooperative relationship. Someone said earlier, it's hard to get campaigns to work together, but this year we really did, and it worked out extremely well. As some of you know, toward the end, Kern County was only open on election day, and we knew that the TJ Cox race was going to be tight. And so Ben pulled off an incredible effort of pulling all these attorneys that we had all over Southern California and persuading them to drive up to Kern for the day. And it made an absolutely huge difference. I know that the Kern County registrar and the Republicans up there have never seen anything like it. We had just about every voting center in the county covered at some point during the day, which is certainly the first I've ever heard of that. Similarly, in Orange County, because we had so many seats to defend, we really focused on having a lot of folks on the ground. I will say this, the Trump electioneering violators, and there were a few over the course of the day, could barely sneeze without us knowing about it. We really made sure that the Orange County Registrar of Voters, very professional by the way, knew what was going on. Everything that we saw that could potentially be a problem, we reported into them, and yet at the same time kept a really good relationship. And then finally, in support of the Christy Smith race, we saw an incident, or we saw a situation in Simi Valley in Ventura County, where the registrar was requiring people to fill out a form before they could get a ballot. And we took a few hours, and with the cooperation of the Secretary of State's office and the campaign, we were able to finally get them to back off of that. So next slide, please. So in any case, like it says, Ben Seinfeld, Emma Harper, Unique Wilson, Alejandro Colon, all the way up to the total support that we got from Yvette and Rusty, absolutely made it all work. Esteban Rojas was also instrumental in making it all work, and we couldn't have gotten the system up and running without Moises Garcia. So not only did we have to train the attorneys, but we had to train lots of people, other people on using the LBJ system, lots of people on using this new hotline system that we're putting into place for the first time. Huge number of hours and time, both putting together the trainings and then actually training people. So it was really fantastic, and I know a lot of voters were helped with a new it was not just a brand new system for us, but a brand new voting system in most of California. And it actually, and Part of this does go to the work that Secretary of State Alex Padilla did and many of the local registrars, but it was really a remarkably smooth election day, given all the challenges that we were facing from new systems and the pandemic, et cetera. Next slide. And that's it for the voter protection team. Thanks again to everyone who helped. And next up is the communications department.
Hi, everyone. Next slide, please. Voices. Thank you to Ben and Kobe. My name is Sherry. I'm the communications director for the California Democratic Party. So I started this year at the end of August and jumped right into campaign mode. So my updates to you all today will begin from August until November. Next slide, please. So when I first started, we took a look at our bare bones communications capabilities. And what we found was that in order to be successful during this campaign season over the next 3 months, we'd have to really focus on 3 different areas. The first is earned media, which are considered anything organic from non-paid media stories, pitching reporters, and non-paid information on social media. The second was paid media, which was anything from mailers to paid digital ads. And the third was our internal communications, looking at our email system, reviewing the health of our email list, and growing our email list. Next slide, please. So under earned media, we started off with putting a large focus on the operational side of how we can gain earned media. What we had was a very healthy media list, but what we needed was the operational tools to be able to gain some ground with the media. So we invested into the essential tools to get that started, like MailChimp, TVIs, and setting up our website to allow us to be a resource to reporters. And one thing that we at the California Democratic Party are very lucky to have are California Democratic leaders like Governor Newsom, Mayor Eric Garcetti, and folks who are just miles ahead when it comes to sharing the CADEM agenda. So where we focused our stories was around working closely with the DNC on the national campaign and keeping voters focused on the more important things in the last 3 months, which was to get the vote out and clear up any misinformation about voting and vote by mail. We also worked on a surrogates program to ensure that we were funneling media inquiries to the right people when it came to propositions and elected campaigns. At the end of November, we pitched about 23 stories with 75 stories running, and that totaled to an earned market ad value of more than 70,000 with a viewership, readership of about 14 million. And please note that this number is actually incomplete because the tools we were using couldn't completely and fully calculate the traditional and print media, but it gives you an idea of our growth in earned media. Next slide, please. On the digital side of things, we were able to reach 1.7 million people alone on Facebook and 1.3 million people on Twitter over the last few months. Our communications coordinator, Maritza, did an incredible job at taking a look at our engagement level, who's engaging with us the most, what time folks are engaging with us, and how to craft content around these targets. Overall, we saw a major spike in our social media platform. Next slide, please. On the paid media side of things, we had a budget for digital media ads of about $50,000, and our goal was to promote targeted proposition endorsements and its full slate of endorsements. Because of the limited budget, we proposed running all advertising on Instagram towards younger, lower propensity voters, an audience that was hearing less from all the campaigns altogether. So in addition to modifying the slate mailers for digital advertising, we also would run advertising specific to individual props, like criminal justice props and other GOTV messaging, which included Prop 21, 22, 15, 16, 17, 20, and 25. So we targeted the following voters that were ages from 18 to 38, low propensity voters and first-time voters, and API, African-American, and Latino voters. The results that we had was an impression rate of about 6 million. We reached about 1.6 million people and had about 20,000 clicks on our ads total. Next slide, please. So in addition to our paid digital advertisement, we coordinated on both the federal and state side of campaigns during the election. In total, we sent about 922,737 mailers, with 68,000 of them being in Spanish. And these mailers included the presidential campaign, congressional endorsements, and so on. Next slide, please. And then with the assembly focused races, we sent a total of 12.7 million mailers over the last few months. You'll see here that we worked with targeted districts throughout the election season to amplify their campaign work. And as you'll see here, we sent 1.8 million mailers for Joan Sawyer's campaign, 1.8 million for Fox's campaign, 1.3 for Horvath, and more. Next slide, please. We also coordinated with the state Senate side on mailers as well, sending a total of 6.1 million plus mailers to these targeted districts. You'll see that we sent 2.4 million plus mailers for the Newman campaign and 1.9 million plus for the Min campaign as well. Next slide, please. So we'll transition over to our internal communications, which mainly focuses on our email program that was created at the beginning of this year. Some of our high priorities for our email system was fundraising, in which Camille will talk a little bit more about later, and any take action emails, which may have included signing a petition, getting the word out about voting by mail. And over the last 90 days, we sent about 2.5 million emails alone. So if you were receiving emails from us every day, I promise that will slightly go down as we're not in the presidential election season anymore. And our list remained rather healthy with an open rate of 24.7%. We even grew our email list from 75,000 to 107,000 emails with some of our creative efforts like bumper sticker giveaways and some of our surveys and more. Next slide, please. And to include to this total effort, we also had a campaign through our Vote 2020 Truth Squad. This campaign effort was simply to share the truth about voting and vote by mail. And this was all an organic effort. In total, we had more than 1,100 members who helped us push out information. We performed about 5 trainings throughout the last 8 weeks. And through our efforts alone, not taking into consideration all the reshares and posts from influencers, we earned about 2,600 in market value through earned media efforts. We had an estimated 36,000 people viewership. And then on social media, we reached 242,000 people and had nearly 90,000 engagements on social media. And this is all earned. Next slide, please. And just to add, some of the influencers who helped us during the Truth Squad was Marin Dungy from Big Little Lies, Tim Simons from Veep, Dolores Horta, Maz Jabroni, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So moving ahead, we're collecting all of this information, planning to do a debrief on where we can improve because there's always room for improvement and where we were successful. This was a large effort with a team of 2, but the communications department could not have completed this work without the support of Yvette and Rusty, who really took on a lot of the comms work as well. So even though there was just Maritza and I, it truly was a collective effort. So thank you so much. And next is Camille from the finance department.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Sherry. My name is Camille Alcala, and I'm the Deputy Director of Finance for the CDP. Here to give you all a rundown of the finance and fundraising work we were able to accomplish in 2020. We had big goals coming into the year, and because of the pandemic, worked to shift our original strategy in order to meet those goals. Next slide, please. Our objectives as we move to meet the climate were A, to adapt to the world of digital fundraising, B, ensure that our outstanding commitments were still solid and confirm new commitments in order to make sure we could fully fund our coordinated campaign, and C, increase the number of federal donors to the party. As a quick reminder, the party raises both state and federal money. On the state side, we can accept contributions from organizations, businesses, individuals, etc. And on the federal side, we can only accept contributions from individuals and federal PACs. It's a long-term goal of our chair and of the party to make our party a more federally grassroots funded organization that is truly powered by the people. Next slide, please. One of the ways we transitioned to this digital world was through virtual fundraisers. We held 6 virtual events with a great lineup of special guests, including Speaker Pelosi, Governor Newsom, and many more. These events ranged in ticket prices from $10 to $100. And through these events, we were able to bring in $222,000 in federal money. So a shout out to our event co-hosts and anybody that donated or attended an event. They were a great success. Next slide. And as you heard from Sherry, we also invested in and revamped our digital communications strategy, and fundraising was a huge component of that work. Our team put in a lot of work into ads, emails, social media posts, and through those fundraising efforts, we received 3,401 donations, with the average contribution amount being just $28. So a lot of great work on that front as well, and thanks to all of you again for continuing to open our emails. Next slide. We also launched a new federal program this year called the 2020 Trailraiser Program. This program asks you, our delegates, to raise anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 for the party in federal funds. We launched this program in March of 2020, and I'm happy to report that after countless hours of call time with our chair, in just 7 short months, our 121 active trailraisers, some of whom I know are on this call today, brought in a total of $360,000. So thank you so much to all our trailraisers. You should be so proud of your participation in this inaugural program. And this number is truly a reflection of your efforts, persistence, and dedication to the party. Next slide. We also continued our long-standing recurring donation program, DEM 2020, or Donate Every Month. We currently have 309 active monthly donors, and the average contribution is just $18 a month. Our total for this cycle of DEM 2020 stands at $134,000. So again, a thank you to our DEM 2020 members. What you give and budget every month is so valuable to us. And it's not too late to sign up to be a member of DEM 2020. According to my calendar, there are still 2 months to go in this year, and then your membership will roll over to 2021. So we'll drop the link to the DEM 2020 page in the chat. Next. With all that being said, I'm happy to announce that CADEM is now fundraising at a 17% federal rate. So out of all the contributions we received, 17% of that was federal. And that is a huge jump from what we've seen in past years. And our plan is to keep increasing that number. And without further ado, drum roll please, next slide. Our grand total for the 2020 cycle stands at $1,783,947 federal dollars. So round of applause, everybody. That is on top of the 11 million we were able to raise on the state side. So if you raised, if you donated, if you were a member of DEM 2020, please give yourself a hand. That number is a huge accomplishment and a reflection of the work our chair and our finance team put into fundraising. And it's the reason we were able to fully fund all our amazing programs and campaigns this year. And finally, as you all know, the work of fundraising is never done. Next slide, please. So stay tuned for the relaunch of our programs, DEM 2022 and the 2022 Trailraiser program, coming to you very soon. Thank you all, Democrats, and back to you, Rusty.
All right, thank you so much, Camille, and really to the entire staff. I think we've got so much to be incredibly proud of. Obviously, there's electoral success that we've all been a part of make happen, but obviously there is great work that has been done over the course of the last 12 months in particular in connection with our 2020 coordinated campaign. And so at this particular time, after we've gotten a full report of all the great work that's been done, wherever you are, I hope you'll take just one moment to give a big round of applause for these outstanding leaders in our party who have, under some really unprecedented circumstances, found a way to put their collective shoulder to the wheel and make sure that we were still successful, not only here in California, but around the country. And in many ways, while we did great things this year, it's really a foundation. It's an opportunity for us to continue to build, to continue to grow, to continue to do more into the future. And I love what Camille was putting forward by saying there's still 2 months left in the year. There's still some great work to be done. Obviously, a lot of that work is right there in Georgia. We got the opportunity to make a difference. California has the opportunity to make a difference in Georgia to ensure that we pick up 2 US Senate seats. So many of the components of our 2020 coordinated campaign will still be in place. So we're going to continue to do swing state Sundays, where we'll be making phone calls, where we'll be sending texts, where we'll be sending postcards and letters and all of that into Georgia. Now, there's 22 million voters here. We had the whole country that we could call into and text to. There's only 5 million voters in Georgia, and the whole political universe is descending either physically or virtually on Georgia. So we certainly ask that you all be patient with us. I know you want to do work, but in some cases there may not be as much work as you might envision. But California is going to show up. California is going to do its thing to make sure that we take those 2 Senate seats. So I want to thank all the staff. I want to thank our officers. I want to thank our leaders who spoke to us today, calling on us to celebrate the great victories, but also calling on us to continue to do this great work. And I want to thank all of you. I know this program has went a few minutes longer than we originally anticipated. We thought it was important to make sure that you had a full picture of all the great work that your party has been doing these last 10 or 12 months. So with that, without objection, we are adjourned until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, when we'll come back together and work through the business of the California Democratic Party. Thanks so much, everybody.
You can have all the money in your hands, all the possessions anyone can ever have, but it's all worthless treasure. True worth is only measured not by what you got, but what you got in your heart. You can have everything, but what does it mean? It all means nothing if you don't stand up for something. You can't just talk the talk, you got to walk that walk. Yes, you do. It all means nothing if you don't stand up for something. And I stand up for you. And I stand up for you. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. You do the best that you can do. Then you can look in the mirror, proud of who's looking back at you.